Dan Griswold, have Mexico's domestic troubles thrown a kind of X factor into the immigration debate in the United States?
They certainly have politically. The proponents of the Arizona law and copycat laws have used that as, I think, an excuse. But as you pointed out, crime is actually down in Arizona, and you talk to the police chief in Nogales, and he says it's one of the safest, that's one of the main border communities, it's one of the safest communities in America. So that's one of the interesting facets, is how it hasn't spilled across. And actually, I think we're something of a safety valve for middle-class families there who fear the drug violence to come over here. So it's a bogus reason for enacting the Arizona. There's lots of reasons not to, and that's a terrible reason to go down that route.
Mark, have you seen this issue introduced in places where it actually doesn't help you very much?
How so?
Well, bringing in variables that aren't really in play in places like Southern California and Texas and in Arizona.
I'd have to say basically the civil war that's going on in Mexico really is a significant element of the debate.
How so?
Because Dan can dismiss it as bogus, and people say, well, the violence hasn't really spilled over. But the fact is, it has in some significant sense. The Mexican cartels have a presence in more than 200 cities in the United States. The fact that there aren't gun battles and beheadings yet on the border, in Nogales, for instance, which is pretty safe because there's Border Patrol agents everywhere, is not to say that this isn't a significant part of the debate. People are justifiably worried about Mexico's problems spilling over into the United States. And it's
but
actually,
all during the time that the violence has been rising in Mexico, it's horrifying. The United States border has been hardening during all that time,
right.
Not becoming more porous, not becoming more violable.
But that's, in a sense, that's part of the point. It has been hardening, and therefore making it less likely that there's that much spillover, number one. Number two, there was research in Mexico about how many people have fled from the northern part of Mexico because of the drug violence. The estimates was something like 200,000 plus people have fled. Half have moved to other parts of Mexico. Half have moved to the United States. I mean, it is in fact driving a significant degree of illegal immigration. And if things really hit the fan in Mexico, you could easily see 2 or 3 million people in a short period of time flee into the United States, because half the adult population, more than half, of northern Mexico has border crossing cards that allows them legal access for supposedly short periods into the United States. That's a legitimate concern, and immigration control is not the whole response to that. There's other things we need to try to do to help Mexico. But there's a limit to what we can do to help Mexico. Hardening our border further, and not just the physical border, but you understand what I mean, immigration control in general, has to be an essential part of our response to what's going on in Mexico.
Clarissa, how have you seen the real problems in Mexico affect the debate on this side of the frontier about what to do about immigration?
Well, I think the United States, we know we have had a problem with the demand for drugs for many, many years. I think before that, the focus was Colombia, now it's Mexico. And as long as that demand in our country continues to be there, we're going to experience the consequences that come with that. I think that when you ignore the differences between immigrants who come here to work and how to have a regulated flow that allows for that to happen legally, and you simply throw everything in the pot, as Mark's group tends to do, and just put everything as if it was one and the same, then what you end up with is an unstoppable hunger to simply put more and more money into deportation-only strategies that do not differentiate significantly between people who are involved with drug cartels, gun smuggling, and human smuggling, and the person who's come here to buzz a table at a restaurant.
No, but can you have a conversation, the kind that NCLR is looking for, when there's a domestic crisis on the country with which we share a 1,400-mile border? Is this messing up the debate for you here in the United States?
I would agree with what Dan said. I think at the political level it has happened. And one of the interesting things is that where a lot of politicians normally like to parade around law enforcement as part of their debates and their positions, this is an area where most of the sheriffs along the border have actually dissented with what many of the politicians trying to stir the pot with this issue is. Should we be concerned about what's happening with one of the biggest trading partners of the United States and sources of labor? Absolutely. And I think there's different ways we need to deal with that. One is the economic relations, and the other one is making sure that we are regulating closely and stopping gun smuggling, human smuggling, and drug, and those kinds of things. But I think to simply put everything into the pot together does a disservice to how we respond to those things.
Juan, this is not something that's going to be solved soon or quickly on the other side of the border, and yet we have to deal with it on this side.
I heard something really, really disappointing in that segment, and there was a leader really doing a disservice to what Oklahoma has done and is doing to fight human trafficking. Oklahoma is doing some really incredible things. There are some nonprofits that are involved. There are some legislators that have fought for protections of victims of crime, be they immigrants or not, be they legal or not. Whoever you are, if you're a victim of trafficking, there are resources and there are now really great protections in Oklahoma for those folks. What I heard, however, was, again, and I want to underline what Clarissa said, a conflation. We talked earlier about how some people see Latino as being synonymous with immigrants, being synonymous with unauthorized. I think, unfortunately, we need to make a distinction between someone who agrees to enter in some sort of smuggling relationship to get into the country but commits no other crime beyond that. Distinguish that person from someone who is a victim of an actual crime and might need some protections along the way, and distinguish both of those groups from people who mean to do immigrants harm and other people harm. This is the trafficking networks. These are criminal enterprises. And when we lock up the border as we're doing, for better or worse, what we're doing is we're creating a market where only trafficking criminal networks are well positioned to take advantage of immigrants.